Practice podcast. If you've never listened to the podcast before, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Christine Goodner. I'm a music educator, author, and podcaster who has made it my mission to talk about music practice and to support educators and families looking to make home practice more efficient and to reduce conflict and frustration in the practice room. This episode is brought to you by my resources for teachers and families. I have 3 books about music practice with young students available that you might find helpful. Beyond the Music Lesson, Positive Practice, which is a workbook for problem-solving early stages of practice, and Music Practice Makeover. You can find links to purchase any of these books at suzukitriangle.com/books. Anytime you purchase one of these resources, you help support the work I do on this podcast, so thank you. This week, we are continuing on in our series on perfectionist thinking, and, the students and ourselves maybe who struggle with feeling that gap between where they are and where they want to be in their playing. Violinist Claire Allen is joining us once again, which is such a treat. You can connect with her if you haven't yet on Instagram. Her handle is at Claire Allen Violin. There is a link to find her there in the show notes. And if you don't follow her yet or aren't connected with her yet, I hope this prompts you to do that. She's got a lot of wonderful experience and insight to share with us. I've enjoyed this series so much with her. If you haven't heard our first 2 episodes, that would be a great place to start to get some background on what we're jumping into today. And we want to remind you each and every episode of this series that we are not trying to label anyone as perfectionist or not perfectionists, and we are being very conscious to stay in our lane as music educators and musicians who think about practice in this way. We are not mental health professionals, and none of what we say is meant to be mental health advice. Our goal is to better understand perfectionism and perfectionist thinking and to discuss strategies for music learning and music practice that can help us as musicians, parents, caregivers, teachers, any and all of the above that applies to you. And we are excited this week to start diving into strategies that we have found help us with the students that we work with and with ourselves. And we hope that they give you some ideas to get started in your own practice as a musician yourself or with your children or with your students this week. Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited to be here again with Claire Allen, and this is 3rd in our series on perfectionism and perfectionist thinking in the private studio. And if you missed the first 2 episodes, we encourage you to go back and listen to those. We give sort of an overview of our topic on the first episode and some different types of perfectionism and how it might show up. And then last week's episode, we talked a lot about different traits that fall in this perfectionism category, things we might see in the music space and lessons or practice, and not to label our children, but just to acknowledge maybe extra care is needed with some of the strategies we're going to share with you today. So we're going to jump right in, and Claire's going to start us off talking about our connection to our body and body awareness that we talked about at the end of last week's episode. So Claire, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so where we wrapped up last week, I had mentioned that often when we are engaged in just a lot of mental cognition or negative self-talk or internal criticism, all of these things can really get us trapped in our heads. And it's highly ironic because we do all these things because we want to be good at music. But to play music, we need to connect to and be aware of our body at an incredibly high level. So sometimes in locking ourselves in our minds, we can actually be shutting ourselves off from our bodies. So we can't actually make the motions needed to make the music. So one of my favorite things to do for myself, for my students in lessons, is a simple little exercise just to kind of bring them into the room. If you're driving while you're listening to this, you may not want to do this along with us. So maybe, save it and try this again when you're stationary and not operating a moving vehicle. So whether you're standing or sitting, just take a second and sense your feet on the floor. And you don't have to be sitting in any particular way. This is not a posture podcast. But I want you to just pick up your toes and wiggle them on the floor and just notice how they feel. And then pick them up and hold them up in the air and spread your toes apart as wide as they can go and hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let those toes release back down. And next, I want you to be aware of your hips, whether you're standing or walking or sitting. And I want you to, maybe shift your hips forward and shift them back, maybe from side to side a little bit, and come to a place of alignment. So if you're sitting, you want to feel your weight evenly into both sit bones on the chair. If you're standing, you want to feel them aligned over the heels. The next thing I want you to sense, wherever you are, is the top of your head. If you have some sort of elaborate hairstyle you did today, you might already be super aware of the top of your head today. If you didn't, you might just be like, oh, I have a top of my head. So I want you to sense the distance between the top of your head and the ceiling, or if you're outdoors, the sky. And I just want you to sense all the space that you have around you, sense your feet on the floor. If you're sitting, sense your hips on the chair, and then sense all that space between your head and the ceiling. And take a deep breath in and let it out gently. So hopefully, wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this, you feel a little bit more present in the room. And doing little exercises like this can be incredibly helpful with students. And one of the reasons I love exercises like this is because the goal is to sense something, and there are not necessarily right or wrong answers. And it's about building that connection. And if you have students who get very stuck in their heads, it could be as simple as to do an on instrument example, have them play something that's fairly easy for them, a scale, a piece that's not too hard for them, and have them play it once, sensing their feet on the floor, and then have them play it once, sensing where their hips are in space, and then have them play it once, sensing their head. You can go as in depth or not with this as you want. I've done it working. I'm a violinist, so I have them work all the way up the bow arm, sensing the fingers, and sense the wrist, and then the forearm, and we go all the way up. And usually it gets better because they're doing it multiple times. But usually at some point in there, we find whatever part of their body they weren't connecting to as much before that makes it work. So doing exercises like that in lessons can be incredibly helpful. And we are so lucky that we live in a day and age where there are more resources about how to use the body in music making than ever before. So things like body mapping and Timani and the Franklin method, Feldenkrais and Alexander technique, and so many more. More music schools than ever are offering, anatomy for musicians classes. So if you're a teacher out there who hasn't yet gotten to experience one of these great courses, a lot of people offer them online. I would highly, highly recommend adding this to your teaching toolkit so that you have resources to, really help kids feel, or not kids or adult students, I should say, honestly, with adults, because we have, our life habits ingrained in our bodies more, it can be more challenging, and we need more tools to help adult students, ourselves included. So that's the first thing I would say, is really be aware of in your lesson about how much you're helping your students connect to their bodies. And if you need if you feel like you need more tools, seek something out, because there's a lot of great stuff out there these days.
I love that exercise you took us through, Claire, because I am, I don't know, I feel like more in my body myself when I go through that every time you lead it. And also I don't think it's something that anybody talked to me about as a student growing up. Um, and I did and do tend to live in my head too much. So, and I know I feel better when I can connect to my body like that. So I think that's a real gift to start thinking about for our students and our kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's pivot a little bit and talk about giving feedback. And so we've discussed in previous episodes how both the type of student who, really wants to please their teacher or their parent practicing with them, for example, might have, some angst about feedback, or the student who really wants to be correct and things to be exactly the way they want it to be can feel, not so thrilled to get feedback about how to keep improving. We think this is a really important topic. And I know when I've worked with students who have perfectionist tendencies, I think this is the thing I start thinking about right away, is just how am I giving feedback in the lesson, and how could I suggest to families that I work with that it might, improve practice dynamics to, could we try this experiment at home and practice and, see if I can help them with any conflict that arises. So I think the one of the first things we talked about is just assessing how much feedback can a student handle at any given time. And that could be developmentally, that could be a general statement, but also just on any given day, any lesson, any given practice. Maybe our student has had a rough day at school, or they're preoccupied by something, or they're just in a more sensitive or more reactive to what we're saying, and it could be like how much feedback can they handle? And I know you suggested, Claire, that just even asking, especially older students, maybe beyond the preschool age, but just asking them what uh, what they can handle that particular day could be good too.
Yeah, just even saying, hey, can I be really picky with you about this for a couple minutes? It gives, a chance to just brace themselves for what's coming. Or they could also say, hey, I'm not into that right now.
Yeah, I think the key is to, if you're going to ask, then respect the answer.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you're always getting that answer, like say as a parent practicing at home, then maybe there's some days you don't ask, you just gently give the feedback with some of these other suggestions, or you just are the encourager in practice and let the teacher give the feedback.
Or you say, do you want me, can I be really picky today or just a little picky? And then you're still being picky. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. We're not saying no student should ever not get feedback, but there's a balance to be had. And there are certainly days where we're offering some respect to our student as a learner and helping them with this process when we respect what they can handle. So
Mm-hmm.
also letting our student play all the way through their pieces before giving feedback, or maybe a small section of a piece. Like let's play from here to here. Let's play the first phrase. Let's play for measure such and such, and then giving feedback rather than interrupting them mid flow.
Yeah.
I think also depersonalizing our language. So instead of saying, your tone was scratchy or your bow was crooked or whatever it is, the tone was scratchy, or let's play it again with a straighter bow, so that it's not about you. Those you words can feel really personal to students.
Yeah. It can be like a physical, like, oh, really, really impacting them.
Yes. And we want to take out that this is about my worth as a human being, or this is about me as a person that this person's giving me feedback on, and compartmentalize into that. Like, this is about playing the instrument. This is about the tone. This is not about me. So I even said, like, oh, our pinky needs to learn how to stay curled over the fingerboard, for example, rather than like
Right.
your pinky's in the wrong spot. We could just, if you just pause and think for a moment, and as teachers, we get tons of practice. If you're a parent listening to this, it does take a moment of pausing, and you might not do it perfectly at first, but just starting to shift your language to talking about an object or a pinky, for example, and not you is really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think it's helpful to think about one improvement at a time. So we're not loading up, here's 10 things that you are not doing the way one would hope right now. That could be really overwhelming, especially to a student who feels very strongly about being correct. So pointing out one thing at a time. A lot of us are trained to do that as teachers. I think it's really important for students who might have this fall into perfectionism or perfectionist thinking to be really take care with that.
Yeah, Shinichi Suzuki famously talked about the 1 point lesson. So I kind of amend that because if I only talk about one thing, I don't get everything done I want to in the lessons, but I do it one thing at a time.
Sure.
And I think as teachers, it can be challenging too because our training is also to notice everything that the student is doing. And it can be, if we're not clear before we start to speak what we're going to prioritize with them, that can be really overwhelming for them. I forget who it was. It was someone's really great online pedagogy session where they talked about it's a little bit like triage, deciding, what's the most important thing to cover first. And save the little details for like later once the big stuff's taken care of. So kind of deciding what that one thing is you can say first.
Right. And if you're helping with home practice, hopefully your teacher has told you, like, please, here's the thing to focus on. If you're unclear, you could always ask. I'm always open to people asking me. There's lots to focus on. If we had to focus on one thing at a time, what should it be? You can ask some questions and get some clarity on that. So you're helping your student with that. And then also make sure your student has a strategy. We're talking about teachers, I think specifically now, for practicing or improvement before moving on. So you want to say more about that, Claire?
Yeah. So I think it's always, at least for me, it's always helpful if I know I'm doing something wrong, but then I know what to do about it. I can kind of go say, okay, well, you're doing this, but now fix this. So let's say they're having trouble getting a note in tune, making sure they can hear it, they can sing it, they can land on it correctly several times in front of you. So they're not leaving the lesson with, oh, here's this thing that I did wrong. I have to go fix it now. Fix it with them in the lesson and make sure they understand clear steps for how to do it. Or here's this tricky passage, do this step, this step, this step, this step. This is how you break it down. Do it this speed, do it focusing on this, and kind of give them a recipe for how to approach it at home so they're not just left thinking like, oh, I did this wrong and now it's bad and I don't know how to fix it.
Exactly. Exactly. The strategies keep us from going into that place of all or nothing thinking of, well, I just can't do it
Mm-hmm.
versus I'm not there yet, but I have a plan. That's our hope, is to leave students feeling like that for sure. And then when we're giving assignments as teachers, we want to be as clear as possible. I think along those same lines as you were just sharing, Claire, is if the student has specific steps, then they have strategies and they can keep themselves occupied with that versus maybe talking negatively about how they're not doing what they want yet. They have a good plan.
Right. So if they're learning a piece, it's not just in this piece, fix rhythm. It's in this piece, work on first section, clap and count rhythm, play with metronome this speed, then play with metronome this speed. In this measure, do the big shift 5 times, listening for this. Then in this spot, do this for bowing, so really giving them a detailed list of things to work on as opposed to just go make it better.
Yes. And that takes time, of course, in the lesson to like map out with our students, but our students are going to come back with a lot more productive results. And I just think as you're talking, as I talk a lot about ADHD young musicians and supporting them, and that kind of breaking down tasks too is fabulous for the student that has task initiation challenges for any reason. Like it's harder for them to know where to start. If we help our student break down like that, it also
Mm.
helps with the just like, I know this isn't where it's supposed to be yet, but I'm not exactly sure how to get started.
Well, the tip that you gave me that I've started using with a lot of my students now, I am not aware of who has diagnoses or not really,
Sure.
but that you gave me two things that were so helpful. One is to use paper clips or binder clips to clip the pages of the music book so that when you open the book, it's right to the page that they need, and then to write instructions on a post-it note and stick it to that page so they don't have to look in the lesson notebook or go look at the practice chart and then find the page in the book and then look at the thing and then remember what that said. And I try to use different colored post-it notes each week to differentiate between, and a lot of my students have said that they really love it and that it's helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've tried that.
Yeah.
And that could work. The good thing about any tactic like that but could really help a struggling ADHD student is that it could help everybody. So if we don't have to have any kind of a diagnosis like you're saying. It's a strategy that's cuts down a lot of steps. So it helps with effective practice, period. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you found that
Yeah.
helpful. So a couple other things about feedback. It could be really helpful to have a mirror or a way for our students to record themselves so that they can see themselves objectively from the outside. I know that can also feel daunting, like for the people pleaser, for example, who's like, "Oh no, I'm going to see my flaws mirrored back to me." So there's some reasons that students could be resistant to that, but a mirror is really helpful. Or I've even told students, turn your device on selfie mode. You don't even have to hit record, but just seeing yourself can really help if the recording is depth that they need to work up to.
I have never seen such straight bows in my studio as I did during the pandemic online, let me tell you, because they were seeing it all the time. It was so much better. And here's a good trick with the video too, especially if you're looking for like a physical technique thing that you want the student to notice, have them watch it with the sound off.
Mm.
At least string players, we tend to be really hypersensitive to tone and intonation. And especially if you're just recording on your phone or your iPad or whatever, it's not going to be the highest audio quality. So if you just watch it with the sound off, but then they can see, oh, is that bow straight? Or am I getting all the way to the tip? Or for another instrument, it might be, are my hands in the position that I need to be? Or, something like that. So sometimes it can be helpful just to eliminate the sound part of it if you're working on a physical thing, because then they're not going to be like, oh, I sound so bad. They're going to be able to more objectively look at what they're doing.
Oh, I love that. That tip was probably going to help me. All right. Also, I think this is really important to praise the efforts and attitude and approach more than the results. And I think, professional musicians even know, and I've seen Hillary Hahn on her 100 Days of Practice talk about like just some days things don't go as well as the day before, our fingers feel clumsy, or just it's like this sounded so much better yesterday. And we don't have 100% control over our results all the time or to do them, consistently time to time. And so I think it's really important to have a pattern of thinking about the effort we put in and our attitude and our approach and not just the output because we can't always control that.
Right. And especially, when we have students who are doing things. I live in an area where we have a highly competitive orchestra environment. We have fantastic public school orchestras, absolutely incredible. I realize this is such a luxury to be able to say I never worry about my students playing all the way through high school because they have that community built into their school day. Now they might not take lessons all the way through high school, but sometimes kids will stop lessons but still play in school orchestra. And that's just, in our public schools. And then of course we have honor orchestras and we have youth orchestras. So Um, I always tell my students I can never predict audition results. And audition results have nothing to do with how well you play. You want to play the best that you can play. But I've taken auditions where I played my absolute like all-time best and didn't get in because that wasn't what that school was looking for that day. And I've played auditions where I honestly kind of felt like I trashed it and I got in. So objectively, if you were comparing just recordings of my two auditions, the one where I didn't get in was the better playing. So it's like, so I tell them I can never guarantee that, but you want to walk in and be proud of your efforts rather than the results. So I always try to say, hey, you've worked really hard on this. I'm so proud of how hard you've worked. I'm really looking forward to seeing you next week and getting to start something new, please. Um, so just kind of emphasizing that. And if my students do something like an exam or a competition, and they hand me the grading sheet. I'm like, oh, okay, you got this grade. Great. Give me the feedback. Like that's what's important to me as a teacher. Yes, okay, great. You got a 1. Congratulations. Is that good? Okay. I deliberately try to downplay my emphasis on that because I want them focused on growth and, pride in the process.
Yes. And I think this applies to every, student we may work with. Perfectionism or not in the mix. It's just a way to approach what we do in a healthy manner. I think for this, are striving for excellence, and things are so subjective in the many situations we're in. And so I think it's really important to have that healthy approach. Like, what can we actually do something about? And it's an important way to frame things, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Along those lines, too, pointing out growth over time. For the students who feel like always striving to bridge the gulf of where they want to go, it can be really hard to also see, but look how far I've come, because that just may not matter to their brain. And so I think we can help offer that perspective and that balance as the adults supporting our students, is like, remember when such and such was hard, remember how it took you so long to get to this point you are. I think that balance is really, really important. Where have we come from? And yes, we'll continue to strive and grow, but also we notice how far we've come.
Yeah. And creating that time to slow down is so important. And it can feel really challenging in lessons, but I think it's really important just to say, like, hey, today we're going to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've learned that if I just send assignments home like that, they're not going to get done.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just to wrap this up, we just want to really take the long view. The process of learning an instrument takes years and years to play a classical music instrument at a high level, and taking the long view and not feeling like, that all or nothing thinking of, we have to be where we want to be right now. It's hard to be patient. And we also in a culture where a lot of things come to us very fast. And I think more and more people are used to just getting quick results on various things that we do in life. And music is not like that. And in a way, it's a gift to us to have something where we have a long view and a long process, and we have to dig in. And it also can be really hard to settle into that or to feel comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
that. Before we go today, I want to share that we will be back next week with more strategies for students and young musicians. We know this is just sort of touching on a few ideas for you this week, but we also wanted to make sure that you had a few ideas to digest before we share more with you. So, to recap a few things from today's episode, connecting students to their physical awareness and to their body can help them really avoid getting stuck in their heads and make it easier to do the things we need to do to make music. I loved Claire's thoughts on that. And I know she has influenced me a lot in my thinking on how to make that work for myself and my students. Also, providing feedback in a way that is sensitive to a student's needs, so that we don't overwhelm them and they can take in what we're saying. We agree that doesn't mean there's never feedback given to a student at any time, but some days they can handle that more than others, and it will help them learn to work with themselves to be in touch with that and to have that respected. Giving students clear step-by-step strategies for improving is really effective. And if we just point out our problems, or a student leaves a lesson or a practice session feeling more intensely that gap between where they are and where they want to be without a path, or trusting that there's going to be a path to get them where they want to go or get them a step closer, that can be especially stressful. So pointing out what needs to be worked on, sure, but also strategies, or let's ask your teacher for strategies if you're a family member supporting your student. And then also emphasizing effort and progress over time can be really helpful for putting what we're feeling in the moment in a lesson or a practice session in perspective. And it helps us to balance out that self-compassion with this desire to be closer to the ideal that we crave to be close to. So that is one tangible piece of advice I think we can all use this week. What stuck out to you from today's episode? Do you identify as a perfectionist, or know you struggle with perfectionist thinking? Have any of these strategies helped you? Or if you have other strategies that you'd like to share, would love to hear those as well. You can send me an email, Christine@SuzukiTriangle.com, or a message on Instagram. My handle is @SuzukiTriangle. We will be back next week with more strategies, and this is just the beginning, we want you to know. But also, we would love to work in strategies that you found have really helped you, if you'd like to send them our way so we can include them in future ideas we share with listeners. All right, everyone. I hope you are having a week filled with great musical things in some shape or form. I am looking forward to being back with you and with Claire again next week with more on this topic. Take good care, everyone.